You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
Aya is just an incredible experience overall. And I believe that the more you get depleted, the less there is of ego. That's why usually people have their biggest breakthroughs on the second, third, fourth day when they're just wiped, when you don't have any more resistance, when you can't rationalize your way through something, when your ego doesn't have all of its constructs anymore and it's just wiped away. You don't have the energy to resist, and you have to succumb, you have to surrender, and you just fall into parasympathetic nervous system with default mode network shut down, with ego essentially off. And then this message can come through, and the healing and the learning can come through, and that's when your most powerful lessons will be learned.
Con la vida, vida de la baila, cura con la guaira, limpia, limpia, taita, vibrando con la hualca.
This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. In this episode of Ayahuasca Podcast, I talked to Shawn Wells. We talk about ayahuasca and biohacking, best supplements for preparation to ceremony, longevity and mental health, and importance of the community, and so much more. Shawn Wells is a world-renowned nutritionist, biochemist, and expert in performance-enhancing supplementation and longevity. He has formulated and patented over 40 unique supplements and a dozen novel ingredients. He also authored the best-selling book, The Energy Formula, which offers insights into biohacking, mental health, and improving quality of life through science-backed strategies. Known as the ingredientologist, Shawn has also unique ability to bridge nutrition, supplementation, and holistic well-being. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Shawn, tell us a little bit about your story, your life story, maybe a short version, just for people to get to know you.
Wow. I started out a kid that was going to go to college for business, marketing, thinking that was going to be my path. I actually was someone that was very overweight and highly unhealthy coming from a background of abuse and bullying. And it was in college that I started working out and really falling in love with supplements and all their potential, and as well as nutrition, and in particular sports nutrition. I was trying to put on muscle, lose weight, reading all these muscle magazines, going to the GNCs and vitamin shops and reading all the books with Arnold Schwarzenegger and anything I could get my hands on. And I had a pretty massive transformation. And like I said, fell in love with supplements and went to a doctor in between my sophomore and junior year of college and told him all about my passion. And he saw how my body composition was radically changing. And he told me, as he drew out a lifeline, between 20 and 80, he said, why not be happy between here and here? And that totally radically changed my life path. I decided to finish up business school, but go back and get all my prerequisite classes so that I could go get my master's from UNC Chapel Hill in nutrition and biochemistry. And that's what I wanted to do, is to be a supplement formulator. And ultimately, that's what I've become. So if it wasn't for that one doctor, I wouldn't be on the path and have all the accomplishments I've had. So it's pretty incredible that your words have massive impact. I'll say that. So, but now I am a formulator, as you talked about. I've formulated over 1,000 supplements, patented 40 unique ingredients. I have a best-selling book, the Energy Formula. It was listed on Forbes and USA Today. It's a biohacking book. It's an acronym for experiment, nutrition, exercise routines, growth, and your tribe. 6 pillars to have all the ingredients to live a longer and healthier and happier life. And I also formulate supplements for many, many companies in the industry. I have a company called Zone Halo. I'm chief science officer for a company based out of China where we come up with unique ingredients called NNB Nutrition. And then I have a group of scientists that I work with from all over the world where we dream up ingredients, and that's called Ingenious Ingredients. And that's what I'm doing these days. And then, of course, I do my social media and I speak on stage and all those good things. And I try and educate on mindset, on psychedelics, on obviously biohacking supplements. I myself have a history of suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, all those pieces, as well as a lot of the physical manifestations of those things with a number of autoimmune conditions like Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, as well as a history of brain tumors and a number of surgeries that I've had to have, including 2 discs put in my neck. I had a pretty severe history of mental and physical pain.
Shawn, thank you for sharing. You sound like a very busy person, so thank you for taking the time off to talk to us. And you mentioned, the words have power, so hopefully somebody needs to hear this, and this will affect their life as well. And given the list of conditions you have listed, you do look pretty great, so I'm sure you're doing everything right. Shawn, you mentioned your history with suicidal ideation and your work with psychedelics, so can you talk a little bit about what's your history with psychedelics and what have they done for you personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think most of my life, I had an impression of psychedelics that they were drugs, and those were for druggies, and those were for people that were trying to escape reality and really just had bad consequences from all the things that I had been hearing. I'd heard about LSD, that you could have trips like years later and, they could come back around. And like, there was all this stuff that I had heard, that I had believed, that I kind of put things like mushrooms in the same category as cocaine and other substances. And these were things that, for those reasons, did not appeal to me. I didn't understand them. And then I started hearing in my biohacking circles, maybe after 2016 in there, like, for the next couple of years, I was hearing Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield. There was like a lot of names that were kicking around these ideas about at least microdosing. And that started opening my thoughts to some of these substances, as they seem to be gaining cognitive function. They seem to be gaining more insights, reducing anxiety, improving performance. So I was becoming open to the idea because of biohacking, because of improving performance. Little did I know, like, this is what I truly needed for a lot more than that. And it was leading into COVID, just prior 2019, that I was talking to a friend of mine, Keith Norris, who had run the Paleo Effects event, and he was telling me about psilocybin and said that I had to do an experience sometime. And he also had done many ayahuasca experiences and told me that was powerful as well. And there was an experience coming up with a number of celebrities in the biohacking space and friends of his, people that you'd, probably about 20 people at this event, every which person you'd probably know right off the top of your head. And I wanted to go. I wanted to, if Keith was doing it, I wanted to try it. But at this time, I was driving myself into a very unsuccessful marriage. I wanted to be separated, be divorced, get out of it. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. I was overwhelmed. You could argue that I was probably close to suicide one way or another, either directly doing it or indirectly doing it through work. And I decided to take this journey New Year's Eve going into 2020, just prior to the pandemic. And again, I was at this event and there was, 20 some other people there, all very famous. And normally I would walk into a room and I would tell everyone why I'm important, why you should like me, why I'm of value, because until that point, I believed that love was fleeting, love was conditional, that my worth was tied up into what I do, that I had no value as a human being, only as a human doing. But actually going into this event, I felt so scared of all these other people that I decided to really lay low. And meanwhile, I took probably the equivalent of about 5.5 grams of mushrooms that night. So a very, a hero's dose, if you will. And all these people that were obviously not taking that much, came in and out of my circle. I was kind of laying in the cuddle puddle, and people like a time lapse in a movie were just coming in and out of my circle, and like asking me if I needed anything, laying by me, caressing me, making sure I had food or something to drink, helping me to the bathroom, just sitting with me, holding space for me. And the whole time I was thinking, why? Why would someone do this if they don't know the value I bring and I'm essentially no one to them? That's all I kept thinking until it finally hit me that I deserve love. I can have love. I can be loved. And I'm valuable as a human being, not just a human doing. And for me, that was a profound epiphany that shifted my heart, that shifted everything thereafter. And my life completely changed after that moment. You could have told me those things and I would have rationalized with you, because cognitively that makes sense. Rationally, that makes sense to say, yeah, you deserve love. You should have love. You can be loved. That makes sense. But until you feel it in your heart, you anchor it in your heart, that's when everything changed for me. And I would not be doing this podcast right now. I think I'd be dead in the ground had I not done that journey.
Well, I'm happy you did do this journey and you're here with us. And hopefully somebody who's listening might find something in it for themselves as well. And I know what you mean with all those cliche phrases, as you know, love yourself, and it means nothing. But then through psychedelics, you finally understand what are they talking about. And I've, we host on average 50, 60 people a month, and I see it over and over again. Just these realizations of those basic and everything your grandma told you kind of things, but now you finally get them. So thank you for sharing your mushroom experience. I'm a big fan of mushrooms myself. I know you've also worked with ayahuasca. So could you please share about your ayahuasca experience, and also how did you prepare to that experience from the point of view of supplements? Because you are the ingredientologist, you are the supplement. If you don't know, nobody else would know. So what?
Yeah. So again, great question. On my ayahuasca experience, my facilitators that had done the experience with me on psilocybin were the ones that set up the experience in Peru. We went to a maloca there, and it was a beautiful place in the mountains. Man, We were with the Huni Kuin tribe, who they were friends with. They did not facilitate this experience. They definitely left that to the indigenous people of the Amazon that they felt were rightly meant to conduct this. And it was beautiful because it was a mother who was the head of her tribe, as well as her 3 children that were between the ages of 16 and 24, 2 boys and a daughter. And it was very, very powerful. They had their headdresses and the paints and the outfits, and they did the dances and chants throughout the entire experience. We did 4 nights of ayahuasca. The first night was an interesting experience because they microdosed us without telling us. We all thought we were going to have this massive ayahuasca experience. Most of us had never done ayahuasca. And so we were all kind of looking around at each other because this goes on through the night. You kind of dose up maybe around 8 or 9 p.m. And, this goes on through the night. And throughout the night, we were, and you're supposed to stay in your own lane, your own experience. This is not one of the types of experiences where you're supposed to talk to each other, like maybe like a psilocybin sometimes is. And we all, the next day, were like, did anything happen for you? Like, I didn't really get much. And what's really cool is I believe that set us all up for a great experience throughout, because we got a small taste of the medicine in our body. We felt safe in this maloka. We felt safe with the people that were in the maloka, being both the facilitators, this tribe, as well as the other people that were there with us during this experience. And it wasn't overwhelming. I think like to get a sense of the whole thing before you actually dive in and feel comfortable, like set and setting, right? I believe that was super smart. And they didn't tell us they were going to do that, but that's what they did. And then the next night and the next 3 nights, essentially, we were fully dosed. And my first night that I was fully dosed, it was magical. It was like full on DMT, like laser light beams, like Tron meets the Matrix or something, with just these hyper bright colors. And I was actually holding myself in a hug for hours, telling myself how strong I am, how beautiful I am, how much I love myself, giving myself the things that I had been seeking my entire life, that validation, that pride that I wanted to hear from parents, from elders, from teachers, from mentors. I gave that to myself. And that was unbelievable. My heart was bursting. And while I'd like to say every night is like that on ayahuasca, and I was thinking maybe I like hacked this whole thing and, every night would just be beautiful laser light beams and lots of love. It wasn't. That's what it was for me that first night. The second night was a little bit more difficult, and there was some grind in there. There was some uncomfortability in there. And, that's what this medicine does. It kind of gives you what you need, and in all the ways. Like, I needed to love myself, hug myself, give myself that validation and that pride that I never felt like I got externally. So that was powerful. But for me to struggle and grind, and the message that was coming through was I was seeing like this imagery that was like uncomfortable and kind of gross almost for hours. It reminded me of like a 9 Inch Nails video or something. It was just uncomfortable. And it finally came through. The message finally came through. If you don't like what you're seeing, turn the channel. Like, you have control. Like, how often have you not used your voice, not used your feet. If you don't like it, speak up. If you don't like it, leave. If you don't like it, turn the channel. If you don't like it, go do something else. Don't sit there with it in something that you don't like. And most of my life, I had sat with things that I don't like, or been in places I didn't want to be, or around people I didn't truly love. And that was a powerful message I needed as well. So, Aya is just an incredible experience overall. And I believe that the more you get depleted, the less there is of ego. And default mode network is truly shut down, turned off, the more exhausted you are. That's why usually people have their biggest breakthroughs on the second, third, fourth day, when they're just wiped, when you don't have any more resistance, when you can't rationalize your way through something, when your ego doesn't have all of its constructs anymore and it's just wiped away. You don't have the energy to resist, and you have to succumb, you have to surrender, and you just fall into parasympathetic nervous system with default mode network shut down, with ego essentially off. And then this message can come through, and the healing and the learning can come through, and that's when your most powerful lessons will be learned, when you're in that state. And it's no different than, I've done Dr. Joe Dispenza when they do the pineal gland meditation, like they wake you up at, 2:30 a.m. and you do this 3 a.m. Meditation, same reason. Tony Robbins will make you go till 1 a.m. and then wake you back up for a 5 a.m. thing. And all of it's the same reason. It's so that you don't have the resistance. You don't have the constructs. When you're tired, when you're wiped, that's when you can get reprogrammed. That's when you can make your biggest changes. So that's done for a reason. And
Yeah, lack of sleep in itself can be psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You described something very similar to what we do here at La Huayra, which is the ayahuasca retreat I run with my wife. And we give people first 24 hours without ayahuasca, just to get to know each other, get comfortable, just so they can let go of that ego. And then 1 week is normally 4 ceremonies, and the lids start to pop off second or third night as they get worn down, and also kind of simultaneously as they get more comfortable with the space. There's definitely a process to it. Like, a lot of people want to come and just do one ayahuasca ceremony, and it's not the same. You need that process. But then when you've been through it, then you can come back for less, and the connection sort of have already been established. So what supplementation and what preparation did you do personally before attending ayahuasca retreat, and what would you recommend to people? Because many people ask us about supplements, and honestly, it's just really hard to find good information from somebody who really understands the biochemistry of it all.
Yeah, and that goes back to this idea of, I know you wanted to touch on this too, is like the dieta, which is diet, but it means more than that. It really means everything that you are consuming. And that can be not only what you're consuming fluid and food-wise, but what you're consuming through your ears, through your eyes, through your nose, through your brain. Like, what are you consuming? And how are you preparing yourself? When I went into this experience, I did none of that. I really didn't change anything. I can say with my research, though, one of the parts that I believe is the most profound is the idea of doing fasting. And I believe that fasting prior to a psychedelic experience has a real purpose beyond just not consuming things and kind of clearing or cleaning your body. All that makes sense. But what we know is that fasting will increase ketones, endogenous, meaning in the body levels of ketones. Ketones are a fuel for the brain. They're also neuroprotectant. They're also anti-inflammatory to the brain. And so what we see brain energy improve because it has a secondary fuel besides glucose. We see the inflammation in the brain go down, especially in areas that may have had traumatic brain injury, concussions, insults from prior physical or mental damage. And then we also see neuroplasticity enhanced via ketones. So I believe like this idea of doing fasting for thousands of years prior to a big psychedelic experience had an important role in actually protecting and healing the brain and having synergy with the psychedelics themselves. And I believe that ketones is actually one of the big scientific reasons for that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And what about coffee? For example, many dietas recommend quitting coffee, caffeine. I know you know a lot about caffeine, so talk to us about that and maybe mention a little bit about what is paraxanthine.
Yeah, so that's great. Great lead in there. So caffeine, about 2/3 of the population or so, is a slow metabolizer of caffeine, meaning that CYP1A2 gene, the cytochrome P450 pathway with the liver that involves metabolizing caffeine, we metabolize it poorly. And I am one of those people, and I get more side effects than benefits from caffeine. Caffeine in your body converts to 3 different things once you consume it. It converts to theobromine, theophylline, or paraxanthine. And what we know about caffeine is, especially for slow metabolizers, it's fairly toxic. It actually has a lot of these side effects. And when you break apart fast and slow metabolizers, this is why we see in studies with caffeine, some people say, oh, like you live longer when you consume caffeine. But one, those studies typically are with fast metabolizers. And 2, it's with people that are having coffee, which has a confounding factor in it that chlorogenic acid and trigonolene are both compounds that are antioxidant and polyphenols that are potently anti-aging. And so that's having a kind of like confounding effect with that caffeine, really negating some of the negative impact of caffeine. But when we look at caffeine studies where there are more negative effects, it's because those studies tend to be without those polyphenols or antioxidants, and they're with slow metabolizers. And so when we break apart fast and slow metabolizers, we see very different results. And again, like I'm saying, as a slow metabolizer, it can take me days to clear caffeine from my system. It can be a 10.5-hour half-life, whereas for a fast metabolizer, it could be a 1.5-hour half-life. So about a 7x difference, very different. So paraxanthine, you can skip the side effects and the bioindividuality of caffeine. You can skip all the side effects of theophylline and go straight to paraxanthine, where we see very little bioindividuality, where we see a very short and regular half-life of about 3 hours. And we see a ton of positive effects where it actually enhances neuroplasticity via BDNF. It decreases beta amyloid plaque. It increases nitric oxide to the brain, increases glutathione and catalase, decreases oxidative stress. It's really miraculous. It increases dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, basically all the ways that we know that the brain ages. Paraxanthine, for all intents and purposes, is reversing that. So this is where it's profoundly neuroprotective, kind of like ketones. So, I believe that paraxanthine would have good synergy around these experiences. Certainly, maybe on the other end, when you're feeling low, depleted, it might be smart to enhance blood flow, enhance neuroplasticity, enhance these neurotransmitters being repleted, enhance the reduction in oxidative stress via glutathione and catalase. And so that you're like bringing the brain back online after an experience.
So how does one consume paraxanthine? Is there any products available or not yet?
Yeah, there's several on Amazon or, on Vitamin Shop or GNC or any places that you might go. There's pre-workouts, there's capsules that are just pure paraxanthine. There's nootropic products that have paraxanthine plus some other ingredients that I'd recommend, things like alpha GPC, which is great for acetylcholine repletion and really helping the health of your brain lipids, the phospholipids that make up the majority of the brain. Tyrosine is going to help replete dopamine and bring that back online. So I'm a big fan of that. Huperzine A is going to help with the repletion of acetylcholine because it prevents its breakdown. This is kind of like, I like taking Kana post psychedelic experience because it's a natural SSRI and it's going to help bring serotonin back online in a very similar way because it's preventing the breakdown of serotonin by blocking it at the receptor. So, essentially a natural SSRI. So if you were to do like 5-HTP, things like saffron, and where to take Kana, like that could help with serotonin. And things like acetyl L-carnitine, huperzine A, paraxanthine, alpha GPC, those are all going to help with bringing acetylcholine back online. And then, like I said, with dopamine, paraxanthine, tyrosine, L-dopa, those would be great. And then things that are going to enhance neuroplasticity are going to be excellent as well, because you want to keep your brain in a neuroplastic state as you're trying to make changes. Like one of the reasons, well, two reasons, maybe three reasons that are really important with a psychedelic experience and you making change. One is you being in a parasympathetic nervous system state when typically you're more in a vigilant sympathetic nervous system state. So this is where I recommend taking things that are anxiolytic, meaning reducing anxiety, things that are adaptogenic, meaning helping your body be resilient. So these would be things on the anxiolytic side. It would be things like magnolia bark, which contains hanakiol, L-theanine, which you can find from green tea, which are relaxing. And then the adaptogens are going to be things like a number of the mushrooms, things like rhodiola and ashwagandha. And then on the side of neuroplasticity, which is my number 2 factor, that's important. Your brain is literally able to kind of rewrite itself because it's neuroplastic. It's in a state that we can make changes readily. When our neuroplasticity is low, when BDNF is low, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, we're in a state of low cognitive resilience. We stay in loops, and this is actually what's seen with depression. Depression, you have very low BDNF. People that are highly mentally resilient have very high BDNF. So what we're looking to do is maintain this high BDNF of our psychedelic experience by increasing our neuroplasticity. And one of the ways to do that would be some of these agents that increase that. So one of which I mentioned is paraxanthine. And then many of the polyphenols are helping with neuroplasticity. So things like resveratrol, pterostilbene, quercetin, chlorogenic acid, fisetin, apigenin. But one of my favorites that seems to have the most profound effect is something called 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. And this is one that you can't get that widely on the market. I know you can get it from Nootropics Depot. but it's not something that you can get widely on the market as of now. It's pretty new. And then lastly, so keeping your body in parasympathetic post-journey, keeping neuroplasticity up, and then again, repletion of those neurotransmitters is going to be important. And so that's what I was mentioning with the acetylcholine, the dopamine, the serotonin, bringing those back online, because when we're in a psychedelic space, all of those are elevated. All the neurotransmitters come up. And depression, by the way, the whole serotonin theory has been disproven and is highly flawed in 2 meta-analyses. And I believe it was 2017 and 2022. There was 2 very conclusive meta-analyses that showed that they potentially have more harm than good and very little benefit. And that's because the serotonin theory of depression is very flawed. When we look at depression, all the neurotransmitters are turned down. And again, neuroplasticity is turned down. And this would make sense because our body, our physiology wants us to feel less when we're traumatized. It wants us to not see colors as bright, not to have as many things come in, not to have as much change coming in, not to sense things on as deep of a level. You basically become numb. And that's done for a reason, to protect you. Now, long term, that is not very protective. Short term, it is. It may give you time to deal with some of these things, especially if that trauma is ongoing. And for many people, that trauma is ongoing. And they need to leave that trauma. That's one of the problems with doing a journey, is some people go right back to the trauma. And that's a really bad situation. And that's where a facilitator is important, and you having safety in your life is important, not just where you're being facilitated, but where you're going back to post-facilitation. That's really important as well. So those are all important. Bringing those neurotransmitters back online, keeping yourself neuroplastic, and then reducing anxiety and staying in a parasympathetic state. That's going to allow for your nervous system to make changes. You're going to be more able to have that effect on the ego and constructs, like keeping that lowered versus like where you typically are when you were more in sympathetic nervous system. You're not going to readily make changes.
Thank you. That's all great explanation. One last question about the paraxanthine, because it seems interesting to me. I kind of suspect I'm the bad metabolizer, but as we record, I'm here in Colombia, right in the middle of the coffee area. I can see from my window a coffee farm. So I think coffee is this psychological thing as well. It's this hot brew you have in the morning, you hold in your hand. So is there a way to maybe I'm giving you a product idea, make some decaf coffee with some paraxanthine in it, so it's kind of would mimic. Does it already exist?
Yeah, there's a product called Rare Bird. Yeah, no, it's called Rare Bird. And you can get it, I believe, on Amazon as well. That does have paraxanthine. But what I do is, it's actually kind of a low level of paraxanthine. It's only 60 milligrams a cup, and I prefer about 200 to 300 milligrams. So what I do personally is I just use a decaf coffee. I kind of bulletproof it with some MCTs, some butter or heavy cream. I often add collagen, maybe cacao, and maybe even some adaptogens like mushrooms, some powdered mushrooms I might add to it. I know that's a lot in your coffee, but then I might just have, a capsule of paraxanthine with it, instead of trying to worry about, having the paraxanthine in the coffee.
Interesting. Speaking of coffee, you mentioned anti-aging effects of it, and just I know you talk a lot about longevity. and you mentioned biohacking as well. Interestingly enough, I was learning about psychedelics through biohacking podcasts as well, like Dave Asprey, and then I was listening to Tim Ferriss and all those people you mentioned. So it's a kind of, let's say, a very ancient form of biohacking. But a lot of time I see biohackers or people that focus on longevity. What's the name of this guy? He's like really pale and tries to live to 300 years old.
Brian Johnson.
Yeah, Brian Johnson. He's he has this perfect structure of this is the supplement I take after this and this and that. But in reality, I think it's pretty stressful for you to be so controlling of your life. And it's like, what in your opinion is the role of mental health in biohacking and longevity?
This is a great point, and one that I've brought up very often. In my book, again, the energy formula, I talk about the blue zones. And, there's people there that are living easily past 100, super centenarians, that are smoking, that are having wine, that are not doing any peptides, that are not doing any injections, that are not doing any, PRP and stem cells and IV fluids and whatever. They're not doing any of this stuff. They're not doing any of the supplements I'm doing. They're doing? They're having good companionship, deep friendships, deep family relationships. They have purpose in their life. They slow down. They prepare their own food, and that food is very healthy. They have 3 to 4 hour dinners at night. When they drink their wine, and this is one of the reasons that I think alcohol is very confounding too, is Americans drink alcohol to get drunk, and we're out at bars and there's loud music and they're screaming and, all these things. Whereas when I was in Sardinia, Italy, one of the blue zones, they're drinking wine. They're having a glass of wine over 3 hours, enjoyed with a nice meal and good friends. And they're relaxing, and life is slowing down, and they're grateful for their lives. So that's called psychosomatic anchors around alcohol. Now, every time they taste that red wine, they're going to think about slowing down, about being nurtured, about friendship. When we're drinking alcohol in America, we're thinking about anxiety and hooking up. And am I safe? Am I going to puke? How much money does this cost? How do I get back home? Can I drive? It's a very different thing with alcohol. But, going back to the point you're making with Brian Johnson, I think there's a lot of glitz and glamour around the magic pill, the magic shot, the magic whatever, this kind of whatever the biohacker device is. And while some of these things can help, I believe the framework needs to be built on a healthy base. That healthy base needs to be more like that Sardinian person. You need to love yourself, like I was talking about earlier. You need to have a healthy group of people around you that support you, that are a network that you can fall back on, that you feel safe around. You need to have healthy food going in your body. You need to get great sleep. And those don't sound sexy. And by the way, another one is intimacy and sex. The data around sex is mind-blowing. Probably the two most profound things that I've seen are maybe three. In intimacy, you could argue, is like friendships or relationships. But having sex with a committed partner, incredible in terms of the immune system, longevity, health span, risk of diseases, depression. You go like across the board, these numbers are massive difference if you're having sex a few times a week with a committed partner. If you have these deeper relationships and friendships around you, massive. The Harvard study showed that was the number one predictor of longevity, was quality relationships. And so like these things are profound. And then lastly, sleep. This is one of like, these are simple things, but we deprive ourselves of sleep. And I'm telling you, your health drops off precipitously at 7 hours or less. I didn't say 5. I didn't say 6. I said 7 hours or less. Your brain becomes insulin resistant, type 3 diabetes. It's literally giving your brain temporary Alzheimer's and diabetes, and that can be long-term. All diseases, the risk for a heart attack, the risk for diabetes, the risk for nearly all diseases, weight gain, obesity, are all going up dramatically when you don't get enough sleep. And so these are easy. So if you're one of these people like I was before I had done my journey, where I was grinding, where I was working 100 hours a week, where I was sleeping 4 hours a night, where I was in ultra vigilant states of the sympathetic nervous system, where I didn't have friendships around me, I didn't trust many people, I didn't have a committed relationship with like deep intimacy and sex. And I was doing all the biohacks. Biohacks were keeping me alive. They weren't anti-aging. They weren't improving my health span. They were keeping me alive. So what is most important is that your mindset is healthy, that the people around you are fostering your growth, that you are seeking out things in your life that light you up and give you energy. Those are the things that now you can add in the PRP or stem cells or V cells. Now you can add in the EBO2 and blue light, red light, all these different things. And I talk about all of them in my book, the supplement stacks. Cool. All of those are great after you have that proper foundation.
Here's what I'm hearing. Have a glass of wine with your wife and then have sex and then go to sleep and don't wake up for at least 8 hours. That's what you should all guys do that are listening. You mentioned companionship, right? The importance of it in blue zones. And what we see here at the retreat is how deprived people are from company. Like as a society, you said the way we're drinking alcohol is kind of wrong. And also, I think the way we have our relationships, we're sort of missing that aspect of tribe. And a lot of time, as I like to say, half of the healing comes from ayahuasca, and other half comes from the group dynamic. When people start sharing openly in the word circles, we kind of create that culture here at the retreat. And then they start opening up and being vulnerable, and then obviously ayahuasca, and they go through this experience together, and they start connecting. It's amazing. Like people form friendships for many years sometimes. So it's we're missing it so much. What do you think about that?
Oh, there's no deeper bonds that I've seen than the people I've done journeys with. I mean, here's the thing: like you can have people that you've known your entire life that don't know you on the level that someone may learn you across a few days in a journey situation, where you've made yourself truly vulnerable, like raw, seen, where your shadow is present, stuff that you haven't let anyone see, even in your own family, even in your closest relationships, even your husband or your wife, your kids, your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters have not seen this part of you. And so when you witness others going through this transformation, being that vulnerable, being that raw, there's nowhere else but for you to lean in as well and to love. Because when you witness others being that raw and that vulnerable and desiring change, now it's possible for you. This goes back to the idea of Roger Bannister in the 4-Minute Mile. It was thought to be impossible. And then when he broke it, tons of people broke it. Because now what was impossible is possible. When you witness others It's now possible in your brain. And the second it's possible, everything changes.
Thank you, Shawn. Those are beautiful words. On that note, let's wrap it up. So tell us again, please, maybe any last comments, and then where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, I mean, last comments are, we're going back to my book and this idea, like the energy formula. Seek things that give you energy, that light you up. If I was to tell you right now, like the easiest advice is make a list of the things, the music, the movies, the friends, the hobbies, the jobs, the places that give you energy, and then make a list of the things that take that energy away. And start seeking out and enriching your life with the things that give you energy. It sounds so simple, but I guarantee 99.9% of people listening right now have not done that list. And I guarantee there's a lot of stuff in your life that you're seeking out right now that's someone else's energy and not yours. So that is an important step, I believe, into gaining freedom and to gaining happiness. And lastly, where to find me is ShawnWells.com, ShawnWells. My book is at energyformula.com. You can find me on social media at Shawn Wells, ShawnWells. I have a lot of free information on supplements, mindset, psychedelics, nutrition, biohacking, all that good stuff. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Shawn. It was a pleasure. Guys, you're listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we do the host, Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.
Con la vida, vida de la baila, cura con la guaira, limpia, limpia, taita, vibrando con